now and then to step back and take the long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is another way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. No statement says all that could be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes the church's mission. No set of goals and objectives includes everything. This is what we are about. We plant seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces effects beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. Let me repeat that. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something, and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for God's grace to enter and to do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future not our own. The long view. What do we make of the blessings that come our way? It has been my fortune to have sired two wonderful, strong, intelligent adult children, one of whom now has a child of his own. Many of you are parents and grandparents, while many of you have had no children, either through choice or through circumstances beyond your control. Some of you have lost children. Others have difficult relations with your children. I do not want to crow this morning as I talk about my new grandfatherdom, though I will undoubtedly romanticize my state as I romanticize everything. I will not show you pictures. One of the great things so far about being the grandparent of an infant across the ocean is that I can coo over the pictures and don't have to change the diapers or get up in the middle of the night. What I want to talk about this morning is how having a grandchild changes my perspective on life. My grandson, Jack Isaac Robinson, arrived June 7th, the day I turned 67 years old. Although in England, where he was born, it was already June 8th by the time he made it to the outside world. By contrast, my own parents were in their 50s when I and my siblings started producing grandchildren for them. Generation X gets around to nesting about a decade later than their parents did. Boomers like me are famously self-absorbed. Our unofficial motto is, he or she who dies with the most experiences wins. We came into, that's a laugh line. We came into adulthood in the heady 1960s when people were experimenting with drugs, rock and roll, and various elements of alternative lifestyles. A year after I left college, my new wife and I set out on a cross-country project to compile a whole earth catalog of alternative vocations. We wanted to explore whether it was possible to make a living without selling out, to devote oneself to making the world a better place and not miss a meal. We never got very far with it, and within a year we had bailed out and gone to law school. But the dream of doing something to improve the world was never far from my mind. It informed my law practice and my volunteer work with the ACLU, my work as a layman in the UU Church in Charleston, and my decision ultimately to go into ministry. Yet I do have a personal bucket list. I'd like to cruise on a big sailboat again. I'd like to visit China India, Africa, and revisit with Jack on a few of the places I've already been. I'd like to finish my book and see it published, and present a paper to an international conference, both of which look like they may be happening in the near future. Right now, however, at the top of my list of to-dos is to meet this grandson in the flesh. He's real cute in pictures, and I expect he's going to be even cuter in person. As I've told this congregation, I'm making plans to go to England in late October and early November. I don't want my grandson to grow up thinking his grandfather is an iPhone. But until this recent event, I hadn't known whether my personal bloodline was going to continue or end with my two children. And maybe it shouldn't matter, because my duty to the next generations is not bounded by this occurrence within my family. Other people are going to keep on having children for the foreseeable future. But there is something special to contemplate my own child's child growing up in the 21st century, entering elementary school in 2021, middle school in 2027, high school graduation in 2034, and college graduation in 2038, if normal U.S. ages hold for these milestones. And all of these, he would be just about a century behind my own father. And just maybe, if my luck holds out, I would be there at age 89 watching him get his degree. But that may be pushing it. Men in my family do not tend to be long-lived. I was named for my own grandfather, Edmund Rhett Hayward, but he died in his 60s when I was a year old, and I have no direct memories of him. But because I was his namesake, my grandmother, who was one of the most significant people in my life as I grew up, substantially helped put me through a fine and expensive college. So this is a personal, long view. I am normally a lot more grasshopper than ant. I'm always about stopping to smell the roses, living in the moment, opting for the concrete pleasures of today rather than the abstract pleasures of tomorrow. But in the long view, I would like to do for my new grandson what my grandmother did for me. So yesterday, I went to the bank to open a new savings account and to put in the first of what I intend to be monthly deposits toward his education. Of course, I didn't get it open because they need a social security number. Does a British subject 6 weeks old have a social security number? Inquiring minds are finding out. But the larger question is, now that I have some definite person who can be expected to live well into the current century, what does that do to my desire in my time left to make the world a better place? What kind of world do I want my grandson to grow up in, and what can I do to bring that about? I think my wishes for the world in which Jack Isaac grows up can be put in 4 categories: peace, justice, equality, and freedom. First, peace. I'd like it to be a world without war. What can I do to make that wish more likely to come true? We'll be discussing the causes of war in the workshop I'll be giving later this month and in September. They are not simple questions. On Wednesday of this week, we mark the 70th anniversary of the dropping of the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. While the atrocities committed by the Nazis, the Japanese, and the Soviets in World War II are certainly moral horrors, I also have to rank the atomic bomb dropped by the U.S. among the horrors of that war. At no other point in the theater of war were 140,000 civilians, non-combatants, wiped out in an instant. And yet, as I say this, I can hear Whit Boykin, my first stepfather, disagreeing with me. He would have been the force which launched the land invasion of Japan had that nation not surrendered in the wake of the atomic bombs. After the surrender, he toured Japan's coastal defenses and saw the measures which would have been waiting for him. He was grateful for the Hiroshima bomb. It may have saved his life. It is complex, hard work to find peaceful means to resolve disputes between nations as between people. In our garden outside and in the back of the sanctuary, we have a peace pole. The one in the garden has now been disappeared under the ivy, I'm told, but it could be resurrected if we need to. This says, "May peace prevail on earth," in 24 languages. It started in Hiroshima. I could join in it without reservation. The dead of Hiroshima call us all to join in it, but that is the beginning, not the end of our quest. Japan committed itself to a pacifist course after World War II, initially dictated by the victors, though it has steadily maintained that course up until now, when many Japanese are moving to repeal the pacifist clause in their constitution. Recently, I wrote an essay on peace and war and said that I could not call myself an absolute pacifist because I would have supported the American Revolution, the Union side in the Civil War, and the Allied side in World War II. But after I'd said that, I added this: I am not happy with this answer. I've been singing songs of peace all my life, musical pieces which speak most deeply to my soul. My heart wants to declare my unconditional opposition to the scourge of war. Justifications such as I have given here seem light and abstract when measured against the horrible, concrete, and unglamorous suffering and loss which any war brings. I hope that in most instances of national crisis, I would respond by protesting military options and encouraging negotiated resolutions. But if I am honest with myself, I can't imagine extreme situations where I would take up arms." Unquote. The long view has to take into account both the forest and the trees. I can hope for the day when all nations will beat their swords into plowshares, but I'd settle for one in which specific disputes found their way to the negotiating table instead of to the trenches. What John Kerry and his Iranian counterpart, as well as the representatives from Britain, France, Russia, and China, have done in negotiating a deal to scale back Iran's nuclear program is as heroic as any act of valor in combat in my book. It also is very hard work. Justice is my second wish for my grandson's world. I know as a practicing lawyer that perfect justice is an ideal which is rarely attained in this world. Many of the people bringing matters to our courts walk away unsatisfied. Jesus said this in the Sermon on the Mount: "Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on the way to court with him, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny." Is this Jesus the cynic? Doesn't he trust the courts to do justice? No, to the contrary, he is saying settle your disputes as early as you can, straight with the aggrieved party. You're not going to get the justice you want from the judge. A good lawyer usually gives the same advice. We're inclined to say that every injustice in the past requires a punishment, an equivalent pain for the wrongdoer in the present and future. I would like to change this paradigm. Justice requires that the wrongs of the past be acknowledged, but not all can or should be punished. The enormous wrongs of American slavery, imperialism, dispossession of the land from Native Americans, oppression of women, harm to the environment will not be made whole by any simple means. Justice will always be an ideal imperfectly realized in the actual world. In the last few days, a big hue and cry has gone up on social media over a Midwestern dentist who shot a prize lion in Zimbabwe. The righteous American public would have dragged him from the jailhouse and lynched him if they could have found him. Then the environmental minister from Zimbabwe weighs in with an op-ed in the New York Times, stating that the country's lions are not endangered, and it is the revenues from wealthy people's trophy hunting which enables the country to maintain its wildlife habitats. Is justice in the passions of the moment or the full consideration of all the factors? A few weeks ago, I quoted a famous passage from our great transcendentalist Theodore Parker, who had devoted his life to the abolition of slavery, but died just before the Civil War and emancipation. "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe," said Theodore Parker. "The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but a little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can define it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice. The arc is a very long one. We can only see a little way. Isn't this close to St. Oscar Romero, whom I read from earlier? Quote, "It helps now and then to step back and take the long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetimes only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work." Unquote. No, I haven't wrapped up justice in a nice, neat package for you, but we'll have to go on. My third wish for my grandson's world is equality. Here, the long view is aided by looking backwards. We can see how far we've come. In the weeks since the mass shooting in Charleston, a lot of folks, black and white, have tried to put U.S. racism in the long view. We've looked at the most unpleasant truth of chattel slavery in this country and how that formed the ideological basis for white supremacy, and how the defense of slavery, indispensable to the Southern economy and morally justified, so it was thought, by white supremacy, was stated over and over again as the reason each Southern state seceded. And so the flag had to come down in 2015. This reevaluation of history would not have happened but for the shocking murder at the church and the forgiveness expressed by the families of the victims after us. This long view tells us why we invented racism, but it does not give us a clear notion of how we're going to overcome it. The lowering of the flag is a necessary but far from sufficient response. How far down that arc can we see? Will my grandson grow up in a world where the color of your skin determines your life chances? We can't bring about the kingdom of heaven, the beloved community, Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream, but we can help a little. As St. Oscar Romero says, that is what we're about. We plant seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces effects beyond our capabilities. Lastly, I wish that my grandson's world will be one of freedom. Not the freedom of unbridled capitalism, where only the wealthy have the ability to buy whatever they want. Not the freedom of anyone with enough money to buy a government and run it in their interests. That is freedom for the few. I want freedom for all of us to pursue our dream of happiness within a framework where the public interest is the ultimate good in societal decision. Freedom to dissent, freedom to disagree, freedom to march to one's own drummer, freedom to choose whom to marry, where to live, whether to have children, how to raise them, how to live one's life. These are huge generalities, and I don't have the vision to discern what the particulars will be in my grandson's lifetime or what I can do to enhance the chances for these dreams to come true. I remember the advice Wendell Berry gave back in my young adulthood in a wonderful poem called Manifesto, the Mad Farmers' Liberation Front. Ask the questions that have no answers. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. Say that the leaves are harvested when they have rotted into the mold. Call that prophet. Prophesy such returns. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. And I close these reflections with a question closer to hand. What is the long view for this meeting house? What have we done in our almost 20 years in this town? And what can we be doing for the next 20 or the next 50? Oscar Romero was murdered because he devoted his life to the cause of the poor in El Salvador. Have we mattered to anyone in this town enough to make someone want to assassinate one of us? I have to say no, but we did. Have the rainbow flag vandalized several times in the years after it was put up. What are we doing? I think we are doing what we can. We are serving the poor of this community by recycling clothes and household items donated by the more well-to-do. We are witnessing for marriage equality. We are opening our doors to people of all walks of life. We do what we can, St. Oscar Romero reminds us. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something, and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for God's grace to enter and to do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future, not our own. Amen.